You are tuned into Glofcast, a half-satirical podcast.
Welcome to Glofcast, the semi-irregularly updated podcast. So this episode is going to be about a recent yet interesting phenomenon I recently came across. It's a belief system known as cantelmoism, and I actually found out about this belief system, and it's actually pretty prevalent on Reddit. It's through how I found out about it was through the Against Hate subreddit, which is not a sub I'm normally on. But for whatever reason, they actually brought it to my attention, and it's interesting to me because from my vantage point, it seems like a system of belief where post-irony is utilized throughout whatever teachings the system of belief has. And I'll kind of get to that later in the podcast, but hopefully this podcast will hopefully explore what cantelmoism is, who Chris Cantelmo is, and why people have beef with it. So, disclaimer, I know the title of this podcast refers to cantelmoism as a cult, and that was more for clickbaity reasons, but I will refrain from making that accusation until I find sufficient evidence to say something like that. So I know Against Hate subreddits and the leftier parts of Reddit, they're a little bit trigger-happy to label anybody who has really any cult of personality to be a full-fledged Jonestown and Heaven's Gate style cult. A few examples include Trump, Jordan Peterson, QAnon, etc. But I'll refrain from making those accusations until I have sufficient evidence to be convinced. So, without further ado, what the hell is cantelmoism, and what the hell is a cult anyway? So I think we should start with cults. So one definition of cult that seems to be very common, but it's one that I really don't particularly care for, is simply religion I don't like, or even admiration or belief system that I do not like. So in my opinion, it's the laziest definition of a cult, but one of the more common ones. So, in order to define cult for the purpose of this podcast, we're going to use a typology that kind of explores cults and other religious classifications. It's the Howard Becker's church sect typology, which it defines cults more from a sociological perspective, since cults are more or less a religious and sociological phenomenon. Beginning with churches, so the most broad brush, a church, according to this typology, is a religious institution which claims a degree of universality. It seeks religious monopoly. Oftentimes it's highly bureaucratic, but it's allied closely with the state. So kind of think of the Catholic Church in medieval Europe. It was almost there was really no distinction between the church and the state. Normally these churches will have ordained clergy, and it sometimes will allow diversity in the ranks via denomination. So view Christianity as kind of an overarching church, and it has various, denominations. And even within Catholicism or something like that, there's Dominicans, Franciscans, Jesuits, Opus Dei, all that shit. So, in my view, one necessarily does not need to be religious in order to belong to this definition of a church, since oftentimes their socialization and, I guess, cultural accustomedness falls well within the confines of the church. So even if you try to distance yourself from the church, maybe as an institution, you would still, because it's so allied closely with the state and with culture, you would still fall within the confines of what the church defines itself to be. So one kind of genus lower than the church is the denomination, which a denomination allows religious diversity and kind of a breakup of the religious monopoly within the church. So they are less allied with the governments, but they still seek to align themselves with it at times, so when it suits their interest. You can kind of view Christianity today within the United States as kind of more denominationalist, as opposed to churchist, because it's less allied with the state in such a way. I know there's people out there that would disagree, but it's not opposed to aligning themselves with it when it suits their interest. Denominations, they're a little more micromanaged. They micromanage a little bit more than the overarching churches do. And in turn, this kind of seeks more effort from their members. So in a way, you can kind of view this as technically volunteering and good works. They're a little bit more central to the Catholic doctrine of salvation, whereas Protestantism, it's more or less faith, and then the explanation there is it will kind of you will reign good works because of your faith. And so technically it's not central to the doctrine. Interestingly, though, Protestants volunteer more than Catholics, I would say, because Protestantism necessarily demands a little bit more effort from their members. So denominations normally will get along well with one another, but they will still seek their way as the true way within a church. So from a Christian perspective, you can view denominationalism beginning primarily with Protestantism. And one strata lower than denomination is the sect. So a sect will often arise from a disagreement or protest within a denomination, and it will seek to return the denomination to its original and truest form. So you can view a sect as generally much newer, but at the same time much more conservative, but not always. It would usually either wither away into nothingness, become so big that bureaucracy must be introduced and they become a denomination, or they will stagnate and become more or less an institutionalized sect. So separated from the rest of the normies so that they aren't technically a denomination, at least in this typology sense of the word, but there will still be certain mores and folkways that kind of govern it, not found in any other denomination. So view an example of this as like the Amish or the Huttites or the Mennonites, stuff like that. With all of this said, what is a cult? So in his paper, A Typology of Cults, Bruce Campbell utilizes Troeltz's technical mysticism concept. So defining a cult in part as a non-traditional belief structure that emphasizes a divine element within the individual. So with that said, you could view a lot of cults are kind of a neo-Gnostic type thing. It's kind of looking within the self and kind of viewing the self as almost distinct from matter, but a type of hidden knowledge found within the self in order to self-actualize. So Campbell additionally lists three main types of cults. So the mystical-oriented illumination type, which, if I were to guess, it would seek to grant the follower a type of quote-unquote hidden knowledge. An instrumental type, where inner experience is sought for the effects, which I'm considering as a type of belongingness or simply feeling good, which is almost instrumental to kind of the reason a cult exists. And then the third is kind of a service type, which I kind of view as the rationalization for why the cult exists from a collective perspective. Is interested in helping others. So I think this typology is a little bit broad, but I think this still grants us a decent beginning definition of what a cult is and an explanation of what a cult is when I'm dealing with Cantelmoism. So let's get into Chris Cantelmo and his hip new internet religion. So if you go on his website, which is cantelmoism.com, you can kind of read a little bit more about who Chris Cantelmo is. So he is a biochemist who graduated from Yale in 1984. He claims DMT is more or less a cure for everything, and it's the explanation for everything about humanity. He claims it cured his brain cancer. So far, it's, in my opinion, kind of stupid and actually pretty dangerous advice. I wouldn't advocate DMT as kind of a panacea, but Cantelmo disagrees. Below, he claims his internet religion, straight from the horse's mouth, is designed to increase the total amount of love and kindness in the world. This is all from his website. To me, it sounds like some hippy-dippy bullshit, but so far, it looks like we have a dude who touts DMT perhaps a little bit too highly. Maybe not more than anyone on Joe Rogan would have done at some point, and claims that, love is the answer, man, while claiming his belief system counts as a religion. He, before his subreddit went private, he actually called his Cantelmoism as kind of the hip new religion for the internet age. So, is this a cult? It's non-traditional. I would say we're starting to tick a few boxes, but I wouldn't really say it's nothing too out of the usual. I say let's kind of continue. So from his website, DMT is the primary neurotransmitter in our brains before we go through puberty. At puberty, simultaneous with an increase in sex hormones, DMT production by the pineal is reduced or eliminated, and we enter the boring, serious world of adulthood and prepare ourselves to raise children of our own. We get to have sex, which is nice, but we also have to spend a lot of the time in stressful, boring situations required of us. the Chris, if you're Chris, if you're listening, which is probable that you are. I found a typo for you, so just double check. It literally says required of us I think it means to provide a safe environment for our offspring. We find mates and create a home and have children, and then spend about 2 decades raising our kids into adults, and then the cycle repeats. So anyway, on this, it's not entirely untrue. I have heard DMT is higher in younger children and teenagers, I'm sure. But this kind of reeks again of some new agey type shit where he's all like, you're gonna grow up and feed the system, man. You're human cattle in this post-capitalist hellscape, brother. Which, whatever. It's the same hippy-dippy bullshit that the hippies used to say. But anyway, it's not something like I'd hear anything different from like some anti-capitalist Reddit subreddit, like late-stage capitalism. So maybe with a little bit more of a new age twist, but in my opinion so far, it's still slightly more grounded than somebody like Eckhart Tolle. I'm not the biggest Eckhart Tolle fan, so let me preface that. But with that said so far, in my opinion, it's still very Holden Caulfield-esque, so it's more or less saying, the world is phony, bud, but I'm so woke and aware that I and my teachings are the only thing that aren't. Which I think is why people concerned with this are mostly concerned with it reaching teenagers. So it paints teenagers as, the last stages where DMT is still present in a usable amount. So it's either now or never, man. So all while portraying this shtick of, what if I told you everything you thought you knew was wrong? So since Chris has kind of established himself as a credentialed expert, and young people who'd stumble upon an internet religion would probably have to be more or less alienated from the modern world in some way, Chris and his cantelmoism system, they're ticking some of the boxes for persuasion, which I think is necessary for, a cult to actually be happening. But so far, I'd say we definitely have a few cult-like aspects present, and this is just on the surface. We haven't even really dived deep into any of that. So far, what do we have? We have a belief system that appeals to the inherent wrongness of the world in some way. It makes an appeal to correcting it in some way via DMT. But I would still argue that none of this necessarily makes it a cult. So it's more or less a belief system that would appeal to cynical young people in the last throes of DMT production. So what else is going on here? A good introduction is an interview by Chris Cantelmo that he posted on his webpage. In this interview, he comes across as, fairly educated, a fairly reasonable person, not dissimilar from a random DMT head you'd find on Rogan, but there are a few subtleties. So first, I'll just admit that he does come across in this interview as somebody who is charismatic. He's somebody intelligent. He's a guy who at least, he gives the impression of wanting to alleviate the suffering of those who suffer the most, which maybe he does. I can respect that, but there are some subtleties in that video and some other videos and some not so subtleties that we should take into account. In one video, he mentions something about flying people out to his place in California free of charge to get them high on DMT. And like I said before, he touts it as kind of the cure for cancer. So he acts like all of this DMT stuff is a very recent and important discovery that he made. I thought that people were geeking out about DMT since the earlier part of this decade. So he missed the boat by a little bit. But in Cantelmo's opinion, there's a piece of hidden knowledge that he found that he wants to make known. He's called the national media, he's called the FBI, and eventually he settled on creating just online communities on places like Reddit. So most notably, the Reddit subreddit Cantelmoism, which I checked yesterday. It actually looks like it went private. But he's made some notes at times to claim to have left Reddit, but he always appears to go back. So it looks to me like he's still on Reddit, but we'll get to the Reddit community in a bit. So for now, let's continue to look around the website. There's a few sections up at the top. There's God, Cure, Benefits, and Get DMT. So we'll start with the God section. So in the God section, he starts with, normal stuff about psychedelic drugs, some Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary type shit about how psychedelic drugs, and especially DMT, they bring you closer to the true reality and can generate a true connection with God, a connection that we had long ago but was severed by modernism. So the powers that be, whatever you want to call it, man. It's pretty standard. It sounds like some of the stuff I would have read back on Arrowhead when I was a freshman in college. But at the bottom of the page lists a cure to this ailment of modernism, of the severed connection with God. So we're just going to click on the cure link, and the first 3 sentences on the cure page. I have been involved in a secret study of a new cancer treatment being undertaken by Mexican doctors with funding from the Chinese government. I have brain tumors that have been successfully treated with DMT inhaled via vaporization. I was sworn to secrecy, but now that I know that the supplement is a miracle drug, I cannot in good conscience keep the secret any longer. He sounds a little bit nuts. But then he'll go off on still on this page, he'll go off on Big Pharma and how they're keeping this secret from us, but luckily we can generate DMT ourselves. And the way we generate DMT ourselves is by staring into the sun several minutes per day, advising his followers to begin at dawn and dusk when they're little neophytes of the Cantelmoism, and with their eyes closed. And once they gain experience, they will end up in the midday, staring at the sun, no protection or anything for maximum DMT generation. Apparently the US government has stockpiles of DMT that it uses to immobilize enemy troops. I don't know why they would do that when apparently it would just help them gain more power, apparently. He then proceeds to give away his personal contact information, claiming that he is morally obligated to disclose this fact. The whole staring into the sun thing, sometimes in the morning, like if there's a sunny window or something and I feel kind of groggy, I will just put my face in the window kind of facing the sun with my eyes closed. And, it wakes me up a little bit, but I'm not sure if that really has anything to do with DMT. And I don't want to go blind, so I close my flippin' eyes. So, I don't really know what to say about that. Like, I do it as a thing that kind of just wakes me up. I don't, stare at it with my bare eyes, because I like my eyes. Anyway, are we at cult status yet? So, just for the website alone, Chris is trying to generate a system of metaphysics for his worldview. So, think of it as a cantelmoist equivalence to the Christian where society gradually degenerated to a point where DMT was no longer being generated, except in children and young adults. So, he then proceeds to give part of his biography. Yale biochemist with brain cancer, was involved in top secret stuff, you guys, and in a way, he almost positions himself as a kind of martyr to be centralized for the good of humanity. His promotion of DMT as the means to connect with God and appeal to young people as having special powers of DMT generation. It ticks a few boxes, I would say, in our old cult definition we talked about previously, mainly because it kind of preys upon young people, like teenagers who are supposedly in the last throes of this DMT generation, who may or may not at the time feel a little bit vulnerable, a little bit alienated in some way. But he also has a desire to spread it far and wide and have his followers do the same thing of spreading the good news. I'd say so far we're definitely kind of ticking a few more boxes. So, Chris, if you're listening, buddy, hate to break it to you, but you might be a cult leader. But I'm saying might there, so in my opinion, let's do a little bit more digging. So his next page on his website after God and Cure is Get the Benefits, where he touts the benefits DMT has had on his life. And honestly, good for him. I've heard a lot of clinical and anecdotal evidence about the capabilities of DMT, both as, something you would smoke or get high off of, and a substance naturally occurring within the human brain. So DMT has helped him with drinking alcohol, joint pain, and apparently brain cancer. So It apparently helped him grew his hair back, and he's turning it into a way to turn people into geniuses. That much I'm skeptical of, because anecdotally, the people I know in my life who do DMT, they're not necessarily, the brightest people. So my advice is take DMT for what it's worth. Like, recognize it for what it is. It's a drug, a psychoactive drug, which has been known to be released during sleep, birth, and death. People use it as kind of a spiritual thing, but I don't think it's a panacea. I don't think you can smoke DMT and just, all of a sudden you become God or whatever. Just take DMT for what it's worth. It's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. It's nothing like that, but it has helped a lot of people with... I know it's helped people with like anxiety about death. It's helped people with spiritual anxiety. There is some value there. I'm not discounting that at all, but I would not tout it as a cure-all. So anyway, that's pretty much what's on his website, and as you can see, there's a lot of fodder there. But the real meat comes within the Cantelmoism subreddit and his personal YouTube channel. So at first, when I was browsing the subreddit, I saw a lot of memes surrounding Chris, and I thought Chris and his followers addressed him as God or Lord, kind of ironically, kind of as a joke. And maybe some of his shtick is somewhat of a bit, but I found the video, Today's Message with the Lord Chris Cantelmo, and I will let you have a listen.
Hi, Chris Cantelmo here with another vibration. It's June 17th, I believe, 2019, a couple of days before my birthday. For those of you who want to get me gifts, please don't. But it's June 19th, 1962 was the day that Chris Cantelmo was born. And I am about to embark on a bit of a road trip, a little trip across the American West, heading up towards probably Montana, through Wyoming, maybe through Utah. I love Utah, land of the Mormons. I love the Mormon people. And I will be making videos along the way and audio recordings for you to listen to. I just wanted to bring you up to date where I'm at. I've left Reddit for good, that hole of toxicity that no longer needs me or deserves me. And when the good people of Reddit come to see that their support of Reddit only supports toxicity, I hope that they'll join me. And we're going to start our own new, completely separate platform. And we're creating a whole new platform system. You'll see how you'll be amazed, and it's going to make everything in your life much, much simpler. Anyway, there's something that's going on here that's quite interesting, and that's when I inhale DMT, spirits come out of the sky and come out of the trees and interact with me and keep telling me that they don't say that I'm Jesus Christ, they say that I am the second coming. And I've been hesitant to talk about this because it seems very egotistical and very, it can ruffle a lot of feathers. But that's what keeps happening. And then I ask other people, have you seen the spirits? And they say no, they see these fantastic patterns and lots of colors moving around, but they don't see spirits or these aliens that have approached me. Only a couple of other people have noticed the aliens. Coma David is one of them. So then I have to ask myself, maybe is God grooming me to be the spokesperson for God in this millennium? I don't know. But why am I the only one who's seeing these spirits? And they are definitely outside of my body. They're not being created by my eyes. When I close my eyes, they disappear. Open my eyes, there they are. So all I can tell you is that there are spirits that have encircled me and my home, and everywhere I go, they follow me. And some of them are evil. I have news for you. There is evil in the world. There is a devil. Now, one has to then ask the question, did God create the devil, or did the devil create himself out of some fractal emergence or something? And if that's the case, we good people of the world need to band together and destroy the devil, because he works in very slippery and evil ways. He tricks you into thinking negative things about yourself. We don't need any negativity. We got plenty of negativity in this world. Now, I have faith in God that he designed a universe in which good will conquer evil. And I'm ready to head up the army that does that. And we're a peaceful army. We are pacifists. I own no guns. I will never hurt anyone. I will never kill anyone. If anyone dies because of me, they're going to die laughing. And if I ever have an army, the only way we're ever going to slaughter the enemy is we're going to kill them with kindness. And they're going to die laughing, all of them. And we'll all die laughing together and be delivered up to heaven in a beautiful orgasm of life. Stay tuned. I'll be back in touch. This is Chris Cantelmo with another Chris Cantelmo vibration.
So in that video, Chris expresses that there are spirits telling him that he is the second coming. He also seems to be aware of the strangeness of that kind of thing, given the reputation of those claiming the Second Coming throughout history, but it's still something he can't really shake. So he flirts with the idea of God grooming him to be his spokesperson in this millennium, but since the Reformation, I would say it seems like a neo-messianic figure has popped up at least a few times a century to claim themselves as being the Second Coming, or new Messiah in some way. And I'm not convinced Chris is any different. So he talks about himself, God, the devil, the spirits, and good versus evil in kind of an actually relatable, easy to access, if not kind of a basic bitch kind of way. But compare this to something like Timecube, where you really have no fucking clue what's going on. Granted, Timecube, to my knowledge, wasn't really a cult. It was just kind of, or at least a sincere cult. It was just kind of a dude that was off his rocker. But at the end, he does mention his pacifism and how his love army will only kill people with kindness, getting them to laugh to death. So I will give him credit where credit's due. He's definitely aware of the absurdity of himself possibly being the Second Coming, but he doesn't disavow it either. So at the end of the video, he plugs another website, childrenofchris.com, which is more or less just a merch page. A few of the designs actually look kind of dope, but it's a little weird to have a fucking merch page plugging your ideology, which is basically, DMT is cool, look at the sun, and love me. So let's watch a few more videos. Here's one of Chris's daily vibrations, where he talks about staring at the sun and the spirit world. The usual.
Chris Cantelmo with your daily vibration. See that bright thing in the background? That's the sun. Stare at it every day for at least 5 minutes. You can work up to it if you need to. Start by doing it with your eyes closed. Do it in the morning at sunrise. Do it in the evening at sunset. The sun is very good for you. It improves your vision. There we go. It improves your vision, and it makes you smarter. It makes your pineal gland healthy, and I like that reflection, right? Okay, anyway. Listen up, guys. You know I love all of you. I love all of humanity. Isn't it funny that the greatest scientist in history is also the greatest spiritualist? And by spiritualist, I mean, I know that the spirit world exists. If the spirit world exists, God exists. I saw heaven and all that stuff. So a scientist comes out, becomes the greatest spiritualist in history. I will soon lead all of humanity towards a single goal of world peace and prosperity without money. Money is going to be the first thing I do when I get elected president of the world, is outlaw money. If you even talk about money, boom, you get killed. And by the way, you can only be killed by laughing to death. Tickling's not allowed. People have to amuse you to death. That will happen in my world. This is Chris Cantelmo with a daily vibration.
The greatest scientist in history is also the greatest spiritualist. Now, notice he never explicitly names who that is, but he implies that it's him. He also intends to lead humanity into an age of peace and prosperity when he's elected president of the world, but without money. Anyone using money will be killed, by amusement, of course. Maybe I'm just jaded, but I can't see how people can take this dude seriously when he says shit like this. So it's difficult to gauge if this is a bit, or if he genuinely has this narcissism and sees himself as some kind of quote-unquote savior, at least at this point. He does seem to genuinely believe in the benefits of DMT, but if it is a bit, maybe he's attempting to get the audience to laugh at him, aka the first step in amusing themselves to death, and thus becoming unknowing members of his cult, maybe even trying DMT at some point. Who knows? If that's the case, 4D fucking chess. I'll hand it to you, buddy. Yeah, 4D fucking chess. But let's watch one more video, and then we'll take a look at the subreddit. This last video is called "What Does a Bad DMT Trip Look Like?" with Chris Cantelmo.
I'm out here in the middle of
breakthrough, and I see there are spirits all around me. I don't know if any of them are my father or Dana's father, my ex-wife's father.
I'm not sure what the hell possessed him to make that, but ironic or not, it's not something a mentally sound person would post. And frankly, I think it kind of speaks for itself, and I think it's actually kind of sad. It's a little bit sad to watch, because it's not something somebody who's well would make that, regardless of if you're tripping balls or whatever. But let's take a look, enough with the YouTube videos, let's take a look at the community, if any, that surrounds Mr. Cantelmo. We'll begin with his main Reddit account. He has several alternative accounts that he uses to evade or just proselytize in different ways. But his main one is the Reddit username chriscgc. His account is actually suspended at the moment, but we can still see some comments. So on a random thread in the Sam Harris subreddit, Chris says, "You are a shameful ignoramus moron and a weak pussy. Study my writings. You have nothing better to do, I assure you. You will be dumbfounded and awed by the breadth of the sheer volume of my comments and posts. The king has arrived. It is me." Once again, well-adjusted and a man of humility. But what else is there? "I am not other people. I am the second coming. I am Chris Cantelmo, Yale biochemist, entrepreneur, Ironman triathlete. I did Burning Man before it was Burning Man. 200 plus Grateful Dead shows. I corrected Einstein's energy equation to E equals mc cubed. And I banged porn stars." So maybe that's what he meant by the second coming. So if I was 55 and could come twice while banging porn stars, I'd be pretty geeked too. But as we can see here, our boy Chris has absolutely nothing to prove, as we can see. Nothing at all. A true man of God, amusing people to death, following the dead, and allegedly banging porn stars and correcting Einstein. From the same thread, somebody calls him out as a delusional false prophet. He calls himself the Reddit philosopher king, the real thing, my love, and then gladly gilds the naysayer. So one thing about Chris, and another reason why I call this a post-ironic cult, is that in his Cantelmoism subreddit, he will buy Reddit Silver, Reddit Gold, and Reddit Platinum for dang near every poster, literally every poster, or person who posts on the subreddit, or at least a lot of people who post at random. So for those who don't know, the Reddit Silver, Gold, Platinum shit is a way for Reddit users to spend real-life money to show another user that they like what they post. Sometimes it'll grant special privileges to the gilded account. It's like $5 per Reddit Gold, a little bit more for Platinum, a little bit less for Silver. So I heard somewhere, I don't have a source on this, but I heard somewhere he spent thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on fucking Reddit Gold. And also spent money on getting people to fly out to him and try DMT. I think I alluded to that earlier. And sometimes he'll just give money to his followers for successfully proselytizing his nonsense ideology. So he's pretty liberal with his money, and I can't help but think many people only follow him for the free Reddit Gold, free money, and free drugs. But so far, throughout all of this, we've seen a pattern. It starts with the recognition that the world is sometimes bad, but then devolves into a purity spiral. Only the young and impressionable have the true capabilities that I seek. Promoting this shit literally in the teenagers subreddit, going through narcissism, actively dangerous pseudoscience, a seeming desire to want to help, but ultimately promotion of himself and his interests, delusions of grandeur, a claim to hidden knowledge and spiritual enlightenment, and topping it off with some messianic fantasies with some hysteria sprinkles. Sometimes you can't tell if he's just fucking around, but I think ultimately he's being mostly sincere in all of this. So Chris, please get some fucking help and stop leading the e-cults. Just stay off of Reddit, stay off of YouTube, stay away from DMT for a while. Everything in moderation, you know what I mean? Like, just stop. You had your fun, stop. You're a grown man, stop with the DMT. But before we wrap this up, we will take a look at the R Cantelmoism subreddit, because this is kind of the main focus of his community. So a few days ago, it said something about Cantelmoism as an internet religion or religion for the internet age or something like that, but he has since changed it to internet peace movement. So apparently where people smoke DMT and giggle to death. It looks like a lot of the posts are from the same people repeatedly, which may or may not actually be Chris himself. One poster in particular, from what I saw, Glenn Plaid, which is honestly probably a Chris alt along with several others. He seems to be posting quite a bit before the subreddit went private. Yeah, look at all of these. So anyway, like Glenn Plaid is in there. I think there's like Poinkstar TV or whatever. I found this on the Cantelmoism Exposed subreddit. So that's the subreddit dedicated to exposing Chris Cantelmo and kind of this nonsense religion. He was attempting to accuse that subreddit of trying to SWAT him, so get a SWAT team after him. Apparently the always sincere Lord Cantelmo has thwarted their plans to SWAT him. One thing you'll notice about the Cantelmoism subreddit is that a lot of these posts seem to be by the same people or person, but there do seem to be some people who actually do follow him. One top post in the sub is Chris telling his followers, "I love all of you more than any of you will ever know." Now, where have we heard that before?
How very much I've loved you. How very much I've tried my best to give you the good life.
Oh yeah, Jim fucking Jones himself. So anyway, I think that's gonna wrap it up. That's really all I have to say on the subject. So if this interests you at all, I recommend viewing the Cantelmoism subreddit if it ever becomes unprivate, as well as the Cantelmoism Exposed subreddit. The verdict here, in case it hasn't been obvious already, is that Cantelmoism, it hits the major markers of a cult, post-ironic or not, and or ironic or not. And Chris would technically be a cult leader, and he has some major issues he needs to work on. This is hopefully brushed over the basics, but the lore does seem to go fairly deep, so maybe take a look there if you would like. And one last thing, CC, if you're listening, bud, and it's very probable that you are, I found a song that you might like, dedicated to your boy, Jay. Everybody had a good weekend and a good 4th of July. This is Glofcast signing off.
I walked to New York back from